What is homeopathy? How is it different? And can it help me? As a naturopathic doctor practicing homeopathy with clients full-time, these are some of the most common questions I get from incoming clients. In this video, I will be offering my explanation of what homeopathy is and dispelling some of the most common misconceptions that I see out there. So let's dive in. Hey guys, this video is the first video in what will become a complete introductory series on homeopathy, where I will cover all of its major aspects in detail so that you can be fully informed on what this unique healing modality can offer you. So stay tuned for more videos to come in this series. I should also say that I will have all of the sources used in this video linked in the description below, as well as a link to my website. You will see that I draw extensively from the work of the Homeopathy Research Institute, and I find that they have one of the best, most comprehensive and up-to-date websites on this subject on the web. So in today's video, I'm going to go through my explanation of what homeopathy is, and I'm going to do it in a way of comparing what it isn't, aka the most common misconceptions out there, with what it is. So first thing that homeopathy isn't. It's not a new age alternative medical theory, recent, or just a modern passing trend. What it is: a well-established medical paradigm with a very deep and rich tradition of usage spanning over 2 centuries and all 6 populated continents. So homeopathy as a healing approach has been used since 1796. It started in Germany with its founder, Samuel Hahnemann, who was a medical doctor, and quickly gained popularity throughout the rest of Europe, the United States, and later on across the world in countries such as India and the South American continent. Its initial popularity, interestingly enough, stemmed largely from its success in acute infectious diseases. And it was used in many of the epidemics of the time that was ravaging both Europe and the United States, such as cholera, smallpox, typhoid, scarlet fever, and more. And in an era before antibiotic usage, it was greatly superior to the conventional medical approaches at the time in combating these infectious diseases. In addition to its success in acute infectious diseases and epidemics, it was also used extensively in more longer-term chronic diseases as well, including physical diseases such as autoimmune diseases, allergies, respiratory diseases, neurological diseases, as well as in psychiatric diseases such as depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Its versatility, lack of dangerous side effects, and remarkable effectiveness when properly used soon propelled it to popularity across the world, which popularity has persisted to the present day. So the second thing that homeopathy isn't: fringe or unpopular. What it is: internationally used amongst doctors, non-doctor professionals, and lay people alike. Drawing from the Homeopathy Research Institute's website, there are over 200 million people who use homeopathy worldwide. This includes 100 million European Union citizens who use homeopathy on a day-to-day basis, 100 million people in India who rely on homeopathy as their sole medical care, 6 million people in the United Kingdom who use homeopathy, and another 6 million in the United States. And homeopathy is even included in the national healthcare systems of several countries around the world, such as Brazil, Chile, India, Mexico, Switzerland, and Pakistan. So this information brings us to the next thing that homeopathy isn't, which is any and every kind of, quote, natural health approach. What it is: a unique, comprehensive healing system with its own methodical approach to utilizing medicinal substances to stimulate the body's own healing abilities in a way that is different from any other kind of healing approach out there. So this is a really common misconception I see amongst my new clients and amongst just people I talk to in my day-to-day life. Homeopathy is not a synonym for just any kind of alternative, natural, or holistic health approach. For example, a homeopath means something different than a, quote, medical doctor, which is an MD, or a osteopathic doctor, which is a DO, and it means something different from a naturopathic doctor, which is an ND. The best way to think of it is the designations of MD, DO, or ND, and of course there are more out there, are like licenses to be a certified general contractor. In this analogy, homeopathy is a specific tool in the toolbox of the general contractor to use in his work. Now, historically, when homeopathy was in the process of being discovered, developed, and gaining in popularity in the early 1800s, many of the people practicing homeopathy at that time were medical doctors, so MDs, who were so dissatisfied with the conventional medical approach of their day that they took up homeopathy as an alternative. In the modern day, homeopathy is used by both medically trained doctors, homeopaths who have been trained in various certificate programs, and by lay people. In my case, being a naturopathic doctor, Homeopathy is just one of the many tools we learn to use in our efforts to help people heal. Other tools we learned were things like nutrition, acupuncture, use of herbs, physical medicine, injections and IVs, mind-body techniques, and so on. But in my case, homeopathy is the tool that I use the most. In my experience, it's the most versatile of all those and the deepest acting. So this brings us to the next misconception of what homeopathy isn't, which is, quote, totally impossible that this works, which is known as the implausible mechanism of action argument. And then the corollary of this argument, which is, well, any positive benefits we've seen, whether that be in research studies or in anecdotal experience of clients or practitioners, is gotta be just placebo because there's no way this could work in the first place. So since the advent of homeopathy, this has been its most persistent criticism. The reason for this criticism is because homeopathy is unique as a therapy in the types of doses it uses. What do I mean by that? So in the process of making the medicines that are used in homeopathy, which are called homeopathic remedies, the original substance which is being used is diluted and often to an extreme degree. When I say extreme degree, what I'm referring to is that often the remedy is diluted past what is known as Avogadro's number, which is a specific threshold from chemistry. In the context of the homeopathic remedies, Avogadro's number refers to a threshold when the original substance has been so diluted that no more of the original molecules of that substance are expected to remain in the solution being used. Therefore, critics of homeopathy have said that since many of the remedies used are diluted past Avogadro's number, that means there are no particles of the original substance left in the medicine, which means simply that homeopathy can't possibly work at all because it's just sugar pellets at that point, or it's just water at that point, so therefore it's totally implausible. And the corollary of this is often, well, if there are positive reports from doctors, practitioners, patients, or clients, it's just placebo effect. Now, I would agree that on the face of it, homeopathy can seem implausible at first. However, before I go through the research that's been done on this topic, I want to put the idea of implausibility into some context. Many times, in looking at the history of scientific developments, scientific advancements and discoveries do appear implausible at first. I would even say that in many ways, this is an unavoidable consequence of something being a discovery. Some of the most famous examples throughout history of something being considered highly implausible at the time of its discovery that we now look back on in disbelief that it was ever doubted would be, in medicine, the recommendation that physicians wash their hands between handling dead bodies in the morgue and delivering babies. This discovery was first published and proposed by Ignaz Semmelweis, who was a Hungarian MD, in 1847, but did not gain popularity until the 1870s. And another example from history of scientific advances that were considered extremely implausible at the time of their development would be manned flights first carried out by the Wright brothers in 1903. However, just 2 years before that was done, the US Navy called flights a vain fantasy. And just 9 weeks before the Wright brothers took to flight, the New York Times speculated it would take between 1 million and 10 million years before humans would be able to achieve what would be achieved just 9 weeks later. And the implausibility didn't even stop with their first flight, because 2 years later, you still had articles in the Scientific American expressing doubt that the fabled performance of flight had ever occurred. Now, even though homeopathy may appear implausible at first, when examining both the clinical tradition and success of homeopathy throughout the centuries, combined with understandings gained from more modern research, which I'll go through now, I say that homeopathy is imperfectly understood as to its exact mechanism of action, but able to cause an empirically demonstrated influence on cells and living organisms, including plants, animals, and humans, with clinical benefits which go beyond what just placebo would be expected to accomplish. So let's look at some of the research I'm talking about. For the sake of time, I will not go into the fine details of every study here, but please know that the material comes from the Homeopathy Research Institute's website, and I do have links to all the relevant material in the description below. So before trying to answer the question, does homeopathy have benefits that can go beyond just the placebo effect? Let's start with a more basic question. Is there any evidence that homeopathic remedies, even the ones diluted so much that, according to Avogadro's number, there is no more of the original substance left, can even plausibly cause changes in living organisms? The best kinds of experiments that have been done to answer this question are experiments where there are specific molecules which are well known to cause specific effects in either cells or whole organisms. And instead of injecting a normal or large amount of that material into the experiment, researchers add what is technically called an ultra-high dilution of that molecule, which is similar to using a homeopathic preparation of that molecule that is diluted past Avogadro's number such that there is no more of the original substance left in the remedy, and then observing if that ultra-high dilution is still able to cause the changes in the cell or the organism that would be expected from the introduction of a larger or normal amount of that substance. So basically, if these ultra-high dilutions are really nothing but water, they would be unable to cause effects on anything, and therefore we would expect that injecting them into the experiment would not cause any changes to occur. However, this is not what researchers find. In what are known as the basophil degranulation experiments, researchers found that adding homeopathic histamine, even at dilutions past Avogadro's number, to basophils, which is a type of white blood cell, triggers the release of histamine, which is not what would be expected if the ultra-high dilutions were inactive. And in what is known as the tadpole metamorphosis experiments, researchers found that adding homeopathic thyroxine at an ultra-high dilution was able to change the rate at which tadpoles turn into frogs, which again would not be expected if the homeopathic thyroxine was inactive. And it should be noted that both of those experiments have been replicated many times by different laboratories across the world. So they're not just one-off accidental reports. So a way to summarize those two experiments would be to say, clearly the homeopathic preparations are working in some way, and that way must be different than the way conventional pharmaceuticals and conventional supplements work. However, all the details of the exact specific mechanism at which they work is still not fully understood and is a topic of ongoing research. And I would add to this part that in the quest of a definitive mechanism of action for homeopathic preparations, there is ongoing research into the physical chemical properties of the homeopathic remedies themselves, using more cutting-edge research assessment tools that are investigating topics such as the biophysics of water and nanoparticles. And some of the great researchers in this emerging field are Iris Bell, Paolo Bellavite, and Andrea Signorini. And I'll put links to some of their work in the description below. Now let's turn to the question of, is there any evidence that homeopathic remedies can provide benefits to people beyond what just placebo would be able to do? Again, what I'll present in this video is just a very small smattering on all of the research that has been done on homeopathy. This is a broad topic which deserves its own video by me and which other researchers have produced many videos on themselves. Again, taking from the Homeopathy Research Institute, the most robust data on efficacy of homeopathy comes from a 2014 meta-analysis of placebo-controlled, double-blind, randomized control trials, which found that homeopathic medicines, when prescribed during individualized treatment, are 1.5 to 2.0 times more likely than placebo to have benefit. So in this meta-analysis, which is considered the top of the evidence hierarchy, it was found that homeopathy was more effective than placebo. And it should be noted that in that meta-analysis, it was a conglomeration study of 32 separate double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized controlled trials. So in this meta-analysis, which is considered the very top of the evidence hierarchy, it was found that homeopathy was more effective than placebo. And if you go to the Homeopathy Research Institute's website, you will see loads more studies on all sorts of conditions ranging from allergies, diarrhea, ear infections, low back pain, depression, and even more, as well as access to the Clinical Outcomes in Homeopathy Research database, which contains over 1,200 studies on homeopathy and various conditions. So that discussion brings us nicely to the next misconception I hear so often with homeopathy, which is that it's unscientific. And my response to that, knowing all the history of homeopathy as well as the modern research that goes on, is to say that homeopathy is a healing method discovered by applying the scientific method, which uses the scientific method at every step of its application. Now, I think this is one of the most underappreciated aspects of homeopathy. Despite all the controversy that would go on to surround homeopathy over the years, as well as into the present day, the founder of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann, actually had an outstanding reputation in his day as a chemist, doctor, scientist, and translator of medical texts. Now, without going into too many details, The founder of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann, was a medical doctor in the late 1700s to early 1800s. And in addition to practicing medicine, he was an accomplished chemist who made contributions to the science of chemistry in his day. And in addition to this, he spoke 9 languages. After earning his medical degree and practicing according to the conventional mandates of his day, he grew so dissatisfied with the effect that his approach was having on patients that he actually stopped practicing medicine altogether for a few years and instead dedicated himself to translating medical texts as his sole source of income, often working every day of the week and even through the night several days a week. So because of his years as a translator of medical texts from 9 different languages, at the time of his discovering the principles of homeopathy and developing them so they could be helpful to his patients, it was actually estimated that he had read more medical texts than any other person living. And in addition to this, Hahnemann was intimately aware of the rigors of the scientific method and how it was applied. He actually had a phenomenal reputation as a very thorough and reliable experimenter. And his ideas on health, disease, and healing were the result of decades of intense study of various medical texts, his own personal experiences and disappointments practicing according to the conventional medical dictates of his day, and his own experiments that he carried out on himself and others in pursuit of this information. In other words, homeopathy didn't just emerge suddenly one day out of the imagination of a medical doctor who was unfamiliar with the basic reasoning of scientific method and application, but it was very slowly and rigorously developed over the course of years and decades through constant study and experimentation. And I would say that this actually adheres remarkably well to the scientific method as we now understand it. In addition, many of the very crucial aspects of homeopathy were rigorously scientific in a way that was actually far ahead of their day. For example, homeopathy was the first medical modality to carry out intentional clinical trials on humans in order to determine the proper usage of medicines. And as I'll go over in greater details in the upcoming videos in this series, the practice of homeopathy itself relies explicitly on the scientific method at every step of its application. What I mean by this is that after we take a complete case of the person's current health complaints, we make a hypothesis about which homeopathic remedy will best benefit them at that time, and then we administer the remedy. After an appropriate amount of time, we then assess the client's reaction to the remedy and make further recommendations. At every step in this process, it is the evidence gathered from the client themselves which guides our next step in the process, and not any prefabricated theories or ideas which would artificially limit us in our approach, which can be a real problem in bad science where any evidence which doesn't fit into our theory is simply ignored and not utilized. So, putting all of this together, my concise explanation of what homeopathy would be a well-established medical paradigm with a very deep and rich tradition of usage spanning over 2 centuries and all 6 populated continents, which is internationally used amongst medical doctors, non-doctor professionals, and lay people alike. It's a unique, comprehensive healing system with its own methodical approach to utilizing medicinal substances to stimulate the body's own healing abilities in a way that is different than any other kind of healing approach out there. Although imperfectly understood as to its exact mechanism of action, it causes empirically demonstrated influences on cells and living organisms, including plants, animals, and humans, with clinical benefits which go beyond what a mere placebo would be expected to accomplish, and is a healing method discovered by applying the scientific method and which uses the scientific method at every step of its application. So now that you have a good explanation of what homeopathy isn't and what it is, the next step is to get a more in-depth understanding of how homeopathy is carried out, both from the client's perspective as well as from the practitioner's perspective, so that you can be better informed on what this unique therapeutic approach can offer you. And with that intention, this video has been the first in an ongoing series that aims at doing just this. If you found this information valuable, please hit the like button as that helps it reach more people, and stay tuned to the upcoming videos in this series. Until next time, be well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.